Remember what Abraham Lincoln said in 1838, delivered an address before the Young Men's Lyceum of Springfield, Illinois. He said, "At what point is the approach of danger to be expected? I answer, if it ever reach us, it must spring up amongst us. It cannot come from abroad. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. And as a nation of free men, we must live through all time or die by suicide." And by the way, there's a campaign underway now by the neo-Confederates, the secessionists, the radical libertarians, many of whom really hate this country, to really trash Abraham Lincoln. Again, the demagogue and fool, with history as a tool, remains a demagogue and fool. We don't praise everything Lincoln did. No man is perfect. None. But I think as the weeks and months go on, I'm going to have a little chat about this, lest you be misled by the boobs who yell the loudest. There's a reason why Lincoln is loved by Reagan and so many of our great men and women and presidents and others. It's not because he was a dictator who threw journalists in prison and suspended habeas corpus and all these other things, which I want to get into in great detail. But he saved the country. And if he had wanted to be a dictator, I suppose he could have been a dictator, and that would have meant abolishing Congress, abolishing the Supreme Court. You know, what's interesting is Lincoln never defied the Supreme Court, the way Obama tries to. Oh, he suspended habeas corpus. Do you know why? I'm going to get into that one day. But only Congress has the power to suspend habeas corpus, and Congress, retroactively, did exactly that. Because the Supreme Court told Lincoln he couldn't do it. He said, okay, and then Congress did it. But why did they do it? That for another day. Did he throw thousands and thousands of journalists in prison? No, he didn't. But more on that in another day. And all the rest of it. But I'll save it for another day. Meanwhile, Luis Gutierrez, who should be the object of our scorn, our friends at Breitbart point out that he believes Latinos should get amnesty and citizenship to punish Americans who are against illegal immigration. After he told the La Raza conference in Los Angeles that Obama gave the Latino community a down payment, quote-unquote, with his temporary amnesty program that halted deportations, quote, of our people, unquote. This is amazing to me. Our people. Americans are our people. When I talk about the Israelis, and I have enormous admiration for them, I don't say our people. I say the Israelis. We're Americans, for crying out loud. We're Americans. What do you mean, our people? Deportations of our people. And I talked about that before, too. We'll take it the next step. Is somebody from Peru and Honduras and Guatemala and Brazil and Argentina and Chile and Venezuela? I know people from all those countries and more. They don't view this our people stuff. Those countries aren't all alike. They don't all agree with each other. Their cultures aren't exactly alike. But there you have Gutierrez, the Martin Luther King of the Latino community, apparently. That's how he views himself. We need to raise our voices, he says, make ourselves citizens, sign up to vote, and punish those who speak ill, and criminalize children who come to our border. So, excuse me, here's a guy that wants open borders, who wants the United States conquered by its neighbors. How else? What other definition is there? What other explanation is there? There's not a single country in this hemisphere that would do what Gutierrez wants us to do in this country. Not one. Guatemala doesn't do it. Honduras doesn't do it. El Salvador doesn't do it. Mexico sure as hell doesn't do it. If Americans were flooding into these countries, and I've read to you some of their requirements under their immigration laws, they're onerous. And here we have a sitting congressman from Chicago who, from within, which is exactly why I read to you that Abraham Lincoln quote, from within, is trying to do that which will be the suicide of any nation, which is exactly why none of them permit it, except us, apparently. Can you imagine a president or prime minister or leader, whatever, of any other country doing what Obama's doing? Any other country in the world? What suckers are we? It's so infuriating. And I would remind you, Mr. Gutierrez, that you're no Cesar Chavez. I thought he was the Martin Luther King of the Latino community, not you. Cesar Chavez. As our buddy Jeffrey Lord wrote in the American Spectator last week, and as I've been talking about at some great length, and I've written about myself in Liberty and Tyranny, call it the whitewash of Cesar Chavez. Yes, that's Cesar Chavez, the late farm worker unionizer. He died in 1993, honored repeatedly by Obama. The man the left loves to name drop for his role in organizing all those grape and lettuce and melon pickers in the day. But there's a considerable twist to this story, as many of you who listen to this program know, but I want to provide you with additional information. Cesar Chavez believed ferociously in the border of the United States, Mr. Gutierrez, because that border protected his union. So ferociously did he hold this view that the New York Times ran a story detailing an accusation that the union Chavez founded, the United Farm Workers, set up a 100-mile wet line, not my word, his word, to keep wetbacks and illegals, not my words, his words. Yes, all those are Chavez's words, out of the United States. And I talked about this the other week. So let's go back in the time machine, writes Lord, to the period when Chavez was rocketing to fame. It was just after midnight on June 5, 1968. 46 years ago, Senator Robert Kennedy, the brother and confidant of the martyred JFK, now himself a candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination, had just won the California primary. The DNC was set for August, the Democrat convention, that is, and Lyndon Johnson having withdrawn from the race. What lay ahead were 2.5 months of political combat with Minnesota Senator Eugene McCarthy, who, by the way, was also against illegal immigration, and LBG's Vice President Hubert Humphrey. But this late night in June, RFK had stepped to the podium in front of a cheering crowd in the ballroom of the Ambassador Hotel in L.A. to claim victory. Long forgotten now is the diminutive woman who was at his side and the man for whom she worked, both of whom were acknowledged by Bobby Kennedy before he left the podium shortly thereafter to be assassinated by Sirhan Sirhan. And where he said, I want to thank Cesar Chavez, who was here a little earlier, he said at some point before he was assassinated. That would be the Cesar Chavez who was already a Hispanic icon, founder of the National Farm Workers Association, later named the United Farm Workers, or UFW. Chavez was the Martin Luther King of Chicanos who, like King and their mutual hero Gandhi, believed and supposedly practiced nonviolence. Chavez was a member of Kennedy's victorious California slate of delegates elected in the primary. And he wasn't on the platform because he stepped away to look for his wife. But that didn't stop the crowd from chanting at RFK's arrival at the podium, we want Chavez, we want Kennedy, we want Chavez. Years later, Obama would celebrate a film tribute, Cesar Chavez, American hero, lavishing praise on the lessons of his life and taking note of the fact that Chavez's granddaughter works in the White House. Obama would also acknowledge the presence of, yes, Dolores Huerta, the dark-haired woman pictured at RFK's side that long ago June night, who the president would credit as co-founder of the UFW. Moreover, Obama in Keene, California, announced the Cesar Chavez National Monument. And it goes on. Don't forget he got the Medal of Freedom. That would be Chavez. The Medal of Freedom was awarded to Dolores Huerta by Obama. So what's the big deal, you ask? Well, he hat tips me. Thank you, Jeff. Brought up a startling fact. Cesar Chavez was deeply opposed to illegal immigration. But the question is why? The fact is that just as Americans along the southern border today want it sealed to protect their private property, the safety of their families, Cesar Chavez wanted desperately to protect his union from illegal border crossings by Mexican strikebreakers. At core, Chavez was demanding, like property owners along the border today, that the sovereignty of the United States be respected. And those who remember Chavez recall him vividly as a committed Chicano activist who neither minced words nor shield away from acting on his beliefs. And in doing so, he put himself firmly on the record against illegal immigration. And I played you the audio from KQED San Francisco, September 25, 1972, several weeks ago. In fact, the concern of illegal immigration was raised to Robert Kennedy, who went to California in 1966 to conduct a Senate hearing on the issue. RFK was furious with a local sheriff accused by Chavez and his allies of being anti-farm union. The sheriff told RFK he was only trying to prevent violence. They had told the sheriff and his deputies of the Chavez strikers, quote, If you don't get them out of here, we're going to cut their hearts out, unquote. That was the Chavez strikers. Said Robert Kennedy, they're struggling for their rights. That is, the union members, not the illegal aliens. Kennedy worked closely with Chavez to write federal law that protected the right to collective bargaining for farm workers. And when Kennedy was heckled by McCarthy supporters in 1968, demanding to know where he had been while they were busy trying to defeat LBJ in New Hampshire primary, it was Chavez who answered, quote, he was walking with me in Delano, as indeed he had been, RFK having showed up in Delano, California, to personally lend his support to the fasting Chavez. On February 7, 1979, the New York Times ran a story in which the paper reported that Chavez, during a UFW-led 7-month strike outside Yuma, Arizona, 5 years earlier, had the union establish a 100-mile-long wet line of military-style tents to halt the flow of illegal aliens across the border. What happened? And I'm quoting from the New York Times in that. Said the Times of a strike led by Chavez's cousin, Manuel Chavez, quote, hundreds of Mexican aliens were brutally beaten by UFW representatives to keep them from crossing the border and taking the jobs of striking melon workers. And the article goes on at further length. So Chavez is the Martin Luther King of the Latino community, and Gutierrez is the Martin Luther King of the Latino community. Chavez strongly rejecting illegal immigration and demanding sovereignty and a secure border. Gutierrez demanding more illegal immigration, rejecting American sovereignty, rejecting border security, and demanding the legalization and, in fact, citizenship for illegal aliens in this country. A lot has changed, hasn't it, ladies and gentlemen? A lot has changed. For the better? I ask you, if we lived in Mr. Gutierrez's world of open borders, if we lived in Mr. Gutierrez's world that people who come here illegally should get legal status and then citizenship in order to vote for those of us who reject what's going on, is that the kind of country you want? That's Luis Gutierrez. He's no Martin Luther King. He's just your typical political hack